Hello everyone, it's Kevin DeSilva here, and today, thank you for tuning in to the Living in Los Angeles channel. We are going to be covering renting versus buying, the sunshine and the fine print. So let's follow along. If you like what you see on this video, hit the subscribe button, turn on the notifications. We want to keep you informed on everything going on in the Los Angeles real estate market. It's a way to own a piece of paradise. So the sunshine isn't the only thing hot in Los Angeles. The rental market and the housing market are both booming. Now, which should you do? Let's talk about the advantages and the disadvantages of renting a home. So obviously you have the freedom advantages, but it does come with a price tag. So renting a home is obviously light on your feet. What do I mean by that? Well, the cost to rent a house is cheaper. There's two costs. There's the move-in cost, and then there's the living cost. First off, the move-in cost. Well, renting a house usually only requires 1 month of rent plus 1 to 2 months of security deposit. How does that look for you compared to buying? Well, when you buy a house, although there are 0% down options, you typically need to come in with at least 3% down, and depending on the loan amount, 20% down of the overall purchase price. I'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about buying. However, the overall cost to get into a property is cheaper for renting. The other benefit is location, location, location. In Los Angeles, it is almost always cheaper to rent the house when compared to buying. For instance, there are more new construction apartments being built in Los Angeles than there are new construction condos. So it is cheaper to rent an apartment than it is to purchase a condo. However, that does catch up with you. In my own personal experience, when I bought a house in 2020, my mortgage payment was $3,500. I could have rented that same house for about $2,500. But in just 3 short years, I moved out of that house and have rented it out for $3,700. I got my mortgage insurance taken off, so my mortgage payment actually went down to about $3,300. So I'm cash flow positive in just 3.5 short years. Now I'm finding with today's interest rates, it does take on average about 5 years for rent to catch up with your mortgage payment. And we'll talk about more when we talk about buying. And one of the clear advantages are, one, you have the freedom to move after your lease is up. This is great. However, it does come with rent increases, whereas when you purchase, you typically lock in that fixed mortgage, so your mortgage payment stays the same. This is why rent catches up. Number 2, the landlord is typically responsible for most repairs. What are most repairs? Electrical problems, plumbing problems, things fall apart not because of your use. Now, drains usually always fall back on the tenant, but that's a different story. But that brings me to the disadvantages. One of the key disadvantages is that even though the landlord is responsible for those repairs, it doesn't mean that they're going to make them. Just as an unexpected cost can happen to you when you're owning a house when a major repair comes up, when you're renting a house, it doesn't mean that the landlord is prepared for that repair. Let me give you a real example. When we were renting before we bought, there was mold in a wall. The landlord did not want to fix it. I kept telling them, I have 2 kids, my wife is pregnant, and the landlord still refused to do it. I had to threaten to sue for the property manager to step in and finally get the whole wall repaired. The whole wall came down, they reframed out the whole thing. It was from a leak in the roof and it had caused mold in the entire wall. That's a real life example of when a landlord does not honor their commitment to you. One of the other clear disadvantages of renting a property is that you pay all this money in rent, and although it is cheaper than your mortgage in the short term, when you leave that property, you have no equity to show for it, which means all of the rent went to the landlord and helped fund their lifestyle. Another clear disadvantage, when your lease is up, the landlord does have the ability to raise your rent. So unlike a mortgage where it is typically fixed, A landlord will typically raise your rent, which means your monthly payment will go up. Otherwise, you'll need to find another place. And last but not least, stability. When you're renting from a landlord, there is the potential that they need to move back in or they need to move a family member back in. And your protections significantly diminish when that happens, both in relocation money that you could be paid for having to leave and for the time that they give you to be able to leave. So let's talk about owning a house, or as I like to call, the ownership odyssey. It's a way to build roots, grow your wealth, but it does take work. Let's get into some of the advantages. One of the first advantages is putting down roots. Now, through your home purchase, obviously you're making a commitment, but in exchange for that commitment, you own a piece of Los Angeles real estate. And Los Angeles real estate is prime real estate. I meet people all over the world, and everybody wants to come to Los Angeles. So one of the clearest advantages is that you're putting down roots. You're building stability, you're building wealth, and you have security or peace of mind. When you own a piece of Los Angeles real estate, the reality is you make mortgage payments. And each payment you make, part of that comes back to you. This is why homeowners tend to be 40 times wealthier than renters. And part of it is because part of their mortgage payment comes back to them in the form of principal reduction. It's where you're paying down your loan, and even if prices stayed the same, your value in the property goes up. 2, stability. Now, stability means there's no landlord who's going to try to kick you out to move in. They're not going to try to kick you out to be able to sell the property to a developer. Really, the property is yours, and as long as you make your payments and pay your taxes, it's going to stay yours, and you can pass it on to your kids, or you can use it for future wealth, and we'll get into that. And 3, when you own the property, you typically purchase into a fixed rate mortgage. Now, this fixed rate mortgage stays the same over time, and while rent typically goes up, we have found that in about 5 years, the rental values in the neighborhood will eclipse what your mortgage is, which means that for the remaining 25 years of your mortgage, you're actually paying less money every month than if you rented your house from somebody else. Wealth is probably the biggest driver, really. We talked about how you're paying your mortgage down and building your value in the property. But what we didn't talk about is that your property value is likely going to go up. It's not guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed in life. But if you look at the historical appreciation of homes, it tends to appreciate at least with the cost of living, which means you fix your mortgage, your property value keeps going up, that equity is yours. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the tax advantages. There are 3 main tax advantages to owning a house. Now, have you ever talked to your accountant and they said, you make too much money, you should buy a house so that you get tax deductions? Well, this is exactly what they're talking about. The first one is your mortgage interest tax deduction. You can write off all or some of your mortgage interest depending on the value of the mortgage itself. All of those interest payments can be written off against your taxes. Number 2, you can write off your property taxes on your tax bill. Once again, this is capped based on the tax laws that went into effect in 2017, but nonetheless, you have a way to claw back some of the money you're paying to the local government on your federal tax return. And number 3, this is my favorite of all of them, the principal residence tax exemption. What does this mean? So this equity that we were talking about, what is equity? It's the difference between how much you owe and what it's worth minus the cost of sale. That's your money after you sell the property. Now, the capital gains tax exemption works like this. If you're single, you can write off up to $250,000 of your capital gains. How does that work? Well, really, it's what you bought it for, plus any improvements, minus any transfer costs. So that means any commissions you pay, any transfer taxes, any escrow fees, title fees, etc. So cost that you bought it for, plus any improvement costs, plus your cost of sale, anything left over up to $250,000 is tax-free to you. Let me give you a quick example. You bought the house for $1 million. You put in $100,000 into renovating it. You end up selling it for $1.5 million. Let's say your closing costs are about $60,000. So you're in the property $1,160,000. That means you have $340,000 of gains. The federal government and the franchise tax board see $250,000 of that as tax-free. Now, this money comes to you tax-free, and you end up only paying taxes on the difference. As you can see, that's a lot of cash in pocket. That doesn't include the fact that you have your down payment that you get back. And if you're married, that number goes up to $500,000. That's right, you buy the property for $1 million, you put in $200,000, and it's worth $1.8 million. You might have roughly about $80,000 to $100,000 of, let's say, repairs and closing costs. So you walk away with that $500,000 cash in your pocket. Isn't that great? But I'm not a tax professional, so I highly recommend you check with your accountant, your enrolled agent, your bookkeeper, or whoever advises you on your taxes. And my favorite part about owning a house is the wealth you can build by putting money into your property. That's right. When you rent a house, if you paint it, the landlord might require you to paint it back to the color they gave it to you at. But when you own the house and you paint it a color that buyers like, those buyers might actually pay you extra money for it. It's the best thing ever. And the same goes for all kinds of improvements. So let's talk about different improvements and how they can affect your value in the property and how buyers will look at it. So painting is one of the best improvements you can make to your home. Painting the outside improves your curb appeal, and painting the inside can make your home feel lighter and brighter. Now this increases your value. And the best part is, nobody can tell you what paint color to do unless you're in an HOA. But that's a different story. I'll record a separate video on HOAs versus single-family homes. The second part is, curb appeal is everything. So landscaping, both in the front yard and the backyard. Now when you rent a house, you just can't do this. The landlord typically won't let you make any improvements to a home, and if you do, it's out of your pocket and there will be no reimbursements. So that means you pay for the cost of the upgrade, you get to enjoy it, but when you leave, the landlord gets to keep the value that you brought to the property. So landscaping the front yard can help your curb appeal, it can help your home sell faster, but at the end of the day, it could even make you just happier to pull up in your own driveway. Doing landscaping in the backyard, putting in planter beds, putting in a patio, putting in a gas fireplace. These are all things that buyers really enjoy. And so even though they are enjoyable to you, just know that you're adding value to your property by doing this. Now, replacing the garage door and replacing the front door actually have, surprisingly, some of the highest return on investment. And once again, this factors into curb appeal. The nicer the home is upon first impression, the better the experience a future buyer will think of the house. And this actually goes to if you want to rent the house out. It's one of the best parts of owning a house is that after the rent has caught up with your mortgage payment, for some time after, you can rent your house out and keep the money. These improvements that you made to the home for your enjoyment will actually help you get a better rental value. Now, there are investments that you can make inside your house that although sometimes they don't return you as much money, I do find when you complete the entire package, you will find that your property value will typically double what your cost was. This is just my experience. If you find that you're having trouble doubling your investment costs, reach out to me. We can walk through the property. My wife is our designer, and we can help you distinguish what your investment costs should be into your different projects so that you are doubling your cost. And I'll put that in perspective. So when I bought my house, it was a fixer, and it needed new windows, it needed central heat, it needed kitchen, bathroom, flooring, everything. We did the yard, we did that, all of that, and we ended up adding an ADU, which I'll go into here in a second. Now, we did it piece by piece. We didn't have enough money to go do it all at once. That would have been nice, but we did it over the course of time. Over the course of time, I have invested about $220,000 into my property. And in that same time period, from when I bought it at $700,000, I have increased the value to $1,250,000. Now, if I told you that you could buy a property for $700,000 or $800,000, put $200,000 into it, and have about $300,000 or $400,000 of positive gain on your property, would you be for it? Yes, you would. Now, the reality is you have to be smart. It is really easy to overspend on your construction. You can pick the nicest materials, you can pick the fanciest appliances, you can pick all the fanciest finishes, but at the end of the day, it's really about, does your area support the kind of construction you're going to put into it? And the answer can be yes, and the answer can be no. But reach out to us and we can talk to you about your house and how that looks. Or if you're thinking about buying a house and you're thinking about doing improvements, we can run you through which improvements will bring you the most value. I like kitchens. So kitchens are a cornerstone of the household. When you come into the house, if you have a great kitchen, accompanied with great floors throughout, the appeal inside the home is amazing. And people enjoy it. So when you go to sell the house or you go to rent it out, the first impression that they have walking in that front door is that you have a nice house, even if your bathrooms are not as nice. That brings me to the bathrooms. Bathrooms are great. Bathrooms are a great way to invest money into your home. In fact, if you have a laundry room, turn that into a bathroom, stack your washer and dryer. These are great ways to make use of space. And the reality is, it's how do you make the best use of space that people want to live in? You'll get to enjoy it, but at the same time, whether you sell your house or you rent your house, it will help bring up your sale value or your rental value. And energy efficient upgrades. Now, just because your house has really nice old wood windows doesn't mean it's better for your bottom line. A lot of buyers in today's market actually appreciate double pane windows because it reduces their heating and cooling cost, which at the end of the day makes it cheaper to own the house. When we bought our house, the first thing we did was install central heat, and we replaced the windows and we added solar. Now, solar is one of those items that does not pay you back the way you think it does. It just hasn't caught on. It really should, but because it's more sustainable. But the reality is, if your neighbor's house were on the market and your house were on the market and you had solar and the other one didn't, the buyer will probably buy the neighbor's house if you tried to charge an extra $20,000 or $25,000 for your solar, which is the cost of the solar. So you don't get back all of that improvement cost. However, if you have an electric vehicle, and this is from my own personal experience, it does help. It took my electricity bill from $300 to $100. It was well worth the investment, and I turned it into a rental. It keeps my cost on the rental lower. And last but not least, a deck or a patio addition. Now, I'm reading reports that it doesn't earn you a lot of money, but when I see homes that sell, homes with nice backyards and nice front yards tend to sell for more money than homes without it. And from my own personal experience, I actually redid the entire lot from corner to corner for $20,000. And with that, I improved my property value by about $40,000 or $50,000. So from my own personal experience, I will say that adding a deck, adding a patio, adding a fire pit can actually bring you a lot of money because it creates that California lifestyle that people are looking for. We live in a beautiful area here in Los Angeles, and it is usually sunny, and so people spend a lot of time outside. If you make their time outside more enjoyable, they will pay you for it. So just to recap with you, on today's episode, we were talking about renting, we're talking about buying, advantages, disadvantages, and the recap is, when you're renting, you have more freedom. This is the reality. But in the long term, your rent's going to go up. You're always going to be paying market rent or somewhat close to it. and you're gonna probably move more often, which your moving cost is actually more significant. I found when I was renting, I was moving every year to 2 years, whereas now as an owner, I move every 4 to 8 years. So I have to say that moving cost will also catch up with you. The advantages are the freedom. You're not tied to a property, you have lower out-of-pocket expense, and this can really help, especially if you don't have the money for a down payment or you can't afford the kind of mortgage for the place you want to live. Now, the disadvantages are numerous. 1, an owner can kick you out if they need to move back in. 2, your rent does go up over time and you build zero equity in that process. And 3, although the owner is liable for repairs, it doesn't mean they're going to make it, which could make your time in the property a big headache. And with owning a house, it does take courage. The disadvantage is it is a lot of money out of pocket, and when something goes wrong, you're responsible for it. But at the same time, your investment into the property a lot of times will earn you money in the long run. So by maintaining the property, you're actually building equity as well. And obviously, the clearest advantage is the wealth advantage. Not only do you have tax advantages while you're owning the property that you can write off on your tax returns, but when you eventually go to sell the property, you have tax exemptions. And if you never sell the property, this property could become the core foundation of your retirement, because while you're owning the property value is typically going up and your equity in the property is getting bigger because you're paying down your mortgage. And this is why owners of property on average have 40 times more wealth than people who rent. I gotta say, from my own personal experience, it's one of the best things I've ever done in my life, and it's one of the best financial decisions I've ever made. If you like what you see on this video, hit the subscribe button, turn on the notifications. We want to keep you informed on everything going on in the Los Angeles real estate market. It's a way to own a piece of paradise.